Okay, so welcome again to the Unity workshop for 2022. If the slides look different, I'm co-hosting this workshop and I wanted to use these ones so you're stuck with it. Nice. So for those of us that are here at the Godot workshop, this will be really similar. First, we're going to talk about what is a game engine. So a game engine is a software environment used for the development of video games. And it provides a framework that makes it much easier to create video games than it would be just to make them from scratch. So these software is dedicated to creating video games, basically. And some of these engines include Unreal Engine, which is probably really close to Unity in popularity. And then there's Unity and Godot, which we talked about last time. And there's also RenPy, which is used, I think, for like dating sims. Some other ones I think are like RPG Maker, is that one? Game Maker, yeah, that's what it's called. But these are some of the more common ones. And why are we deciding to teach Unity this year? So Unity is a widely used and highly documented game engine. It's one of the most popular game engines in the world. I think it's only rivaled by like Unreal Engine for how popular it is. So it's really well used. So if you ever have any questions about anything, there's lots of people that I'm sure have had the same questions, so you could look it up, or you could ask any one of us, of course. Some of the great points about Unity is it's available across many platforms, from Windows to Mac, since it's such a widely used engine. It's free, so for our purposes, it's completely free to use. You could use Unity with a personal license, and you don't have to pay a single dime. I think you only have to pay if you're like an enterprise that makes a certain amount of money every year. But I don't think any of us are concerned with that right now. It has support for 2D, 3D, AR, and VR. AR is augmented reality, and VR is virtual reality. If you don't know what either is, augmented reality is like you display something in the real world that's like digital. So mainly it's used for helping out, like as a tool to help out people that are solving problems in the real world. And virtual reality, you're probably more familiar with. You put the user inside a virtual world. So AR is still related to the real world. VR is like completely in a digital world. Another benefit of Unity is the Unity Asset Store, where you could search and use many assets for free. It's used by a lot of people, and there's tons of assets on there. And honestly, we recommend taking stuff from there because we only have a semester, so it's going to be hard to make every single asset that you need. And Unity is good for making any type of game. So this goes from 2D, 3D, you name it. And then fun fact, Unity is now used for visualization in many different industries. So this is something I'm particularly familiar with. In my internship, we actually are trying to use Unity to do different stuff, and I've heard of Unity being used in like architecture. I saw an article about people using Unity to teach like dentist students about certain medical procedures. So it's used in not just the gaming industry. Here's some games that are made in Unity. So these are some really popular games. You have Hollow Knight, Cuphead, Risk of Rain, Genshin, and Beat Saber. And yeah, so you can see that represented here is a plethora of different types of games. We have 2D, 3D, bad games, good games. So
what's the bad game, Enzo?
I think you could figure it out yourself. Just know that, yeah, I think, just know that there's a recently announced anime for a bad game. And then another fun fact, this is me and my team, that we did our senior project using Unity, and we did a VR game. So I'm just showing you the possibilities of Unity. And we actually created a VR game where we teach people how to, like a certain CS concept. So just know that Unity can be used in lots of different ways, and that you don't need to like focus your scope just on game development. So this is something that's actually pretty applicable to other stuff. Thanks for adding this slide, Larry. So this can be you in Unity. I don't know if you're specifically this kid, but you could be as happy as him. And let's hop into Unity. So if you haven't yet, please download Unity. It comes as an installer for Unity Hub, and then once you install Unity Hub, you could install what specific version of Unity you want. We just want any version of Unity that has 2019. So this is what Unity Hub looks like. If you go here to the installs, oh, we're using 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we're using 2021 now. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. As a rule of thumb, you can, if your project is updated or outdated, you can generally move up in versions, but you can't really move back in versions, if that makes sense. So if you have like a 2019 version of a project and you have a 2021 install, it should be fine to like merge or move the project into the next version. So, what are we doing? We're creating a new project. Okay. So if you open your Unity Hub, we're going to click New Project here. For today, we're going to be making a 3D game. So click 3D, right? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Because last time we made a 2D game, so we thought it would be fun to make a 3D game. And then honestly, this takes a pretty long time to load. So we're probably going to be stuck here for a few minutes. Also, if you have not downloaded Visual Studio Code, please do that, because we're going to do some scripting and you're going to need it. And it's kind of hard to use. I think if you don't have it, it opens a text editor, no? Like it just, or yeah, the Unity text editor, but that's kind of, yeah, it's not fun to use. So please use Visual Studio Code and we'll show you how to use that. Okay, I'm back. Something I forgot to mention also is that it's really, really helpful to have a mouse in Unity because it's really hard to edit and move around the editor not using a mouse. So if you're here and you don't have a mouse in the room, I'm sorry. But if you're online, trees, and you don't have a mouse, please try and use one. Okay, so I'm going to go over the basic, or basically what everything is in Unity. Here is the main hierarchy. Actually, let me explain this in a different way. So a Unity project is it's a folder and it has a bunch of files. And inside that folder, there's a folder called Assets. And Assets is basically where you're going to be storing everything that you're using. And each level in Unity is basically called a scene. So we have a folder that's pre-generated called scene, and the basic scene is called sample scene. And in these scenes, we have a hierarchy of different objects. So when you create a new project or a new scene, the only thing that's going to be in there is called the main camera. And if you click on it, you can see like what the camera sees right here. I think you can make it bigger.
You could just go to game also.
Oh yeah. So there's a little camera here, or window here that shows you what the camera sees. And then there's also directional light, which is basically like where the sun is shining its light from. So you can move that around or change like the color of the light to like change how the lighting looks. So the next thing I want to talk about is right here on the right hand side. That's called the inspector. And in the inspector, when you click on a certain object in the scene, it'll basically show all the different properties and different parts of the object that are like available in the camera. So the camera here, for example, you could rename the camera. So if we look here on the right-hand side and we click the main camera, we see the inspector for the main camera. We could rename the camera. So let's call it camera, I guess. And then you could also rename here by right-clicking on it and going to rename. And then here's some of the object or the properties that are in the camera. So every object that's in the scene is represented by a transform. A transform is basically a vector that holds the coordinates for the coordinates and the rotation and the scale for the object. So it's at position 0, 1, -10. So the x, if we look up here in the corner, we see x is in like this left direction, z is in the forward direction, and y is in the up direction. So if we wanted to like say make the camera go up a bit, we could change this to like 10 and it goes up. And then the rotation is the same thing. These are also in terms of the axes here. So we wanted to rotate around the x-axis. And this is in degrees, by the way, so it's 90 degrees. It turns downwards. So, for example, if you wanted to make like a top-down game, you could turn the camera 90 degrees downward and put the camera up, and now you have a camera looking down. So that's just something to think about. And here we have the actual camera object itself. I won't go into everything that's here, but you could play around with some of the settings here. Like we have field of view, which of course will change how wide the camera can see. Oh wow, that's really wide. And I'm just doing Control Z to reset all these settings that I'm changing, by the way. You could also change like what the sky looks like, so you can make it, oh, I guess not the sky, just what it's looking at. You could change, and then let's get into the basic controls. So to move around in the scene, I'm holding down right click. Holding down right click lets you look around in the scene, and then using WASD, you can move around while holding down right click. And if you hold down shift, you go faster, so it's like a video game, you know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wait, no, you didn't. You muted him on this setup. You have to mute him on the actual.
oh, okay, I see. I'm sorry. Okay.
You move that way?
Huh?
There's not like another way to move that.
Okay. Okay, what was I talking about? All right, the controls, right. So we can look around holding down right click, so that's how you basically move around. And you could also use the view tool, which lets you like pan. These right here are like your tools in the top left-hand side. These are your tools. So I'll show you what each tool does. We have the view tool, which lets you pan around and stuff, but to actually rotate, you need to hold right click. And then these two tools are probably the most important. This is the transform position tool. So these colors correspond to the axes up here. So green is Y, X is red, blue is Z. So you could just move along these axes by clicking the arrows or holding down left click on the arrows and moving them. Let me reset that. And then you could also like click this middle thing and just move it, like move all three, or either two axes at a time, or you could move all three at a time. So it's less precise than like actually just typing in the position, but if you know, like you could do it freehand. Like I'm sure you don't want to type in every single thing. The next thing is the rotation tool. So same deal as the position tool. We're just going along the axes, and you can see the angle that you're rotating the camera. So if you look in the viewport here on the right, you can see I'm turning slightly. I guess it's more obvious if I do this. All right, makes sense. What is this? Scale tool. Okay, so this I didn't talk about. So you can modify the scale of an object. So if you want it to be really big, you could say it's like 100. Oh wait.
Really see the effects.
Yeah, it won't make sense with the camera.
You can do it later.
Yeah, we'll show you later, but you could like change the scale of it here. Rect tool. I honestly don't know what this is. I think this just selects like a certain amount of objects. So if you have multiple objects you want to select, you could use the rect tool. Transform is like all three in one, basically. I never used that. I don't know why. I just think it's confusing, so I just used a specific one. Okay, what next? There are tabs up here too. So if you want to see what the game will look like when you launch it, you could press game. So this is like actually what the camera sees. So if you don't want to actually like launch the game and you just want to see what it looks like, you could press this tab here. And you could actually launch the game by pressing this play button. So this will load the game, and you could play it from inside the editor. And you could pause it too if you need to like debug something, but we'll get into that later. And pressing it again and exits the playing phase. What else should I talk about? We have, there's another tab here called the Asset Store. This is what I was talking about before about there being like an online library for you to pick assets from. It's actually a website now. It leads you to a website. So you could look for assets here. So say you want, I don't know, you want a 2D, what do we want? Want like a spaceship. And then you could choose things that are free. Okay, and here are some like 3D models for spaceships and stuff. So what you would do is you would go to the asset, and then you would click add to my assets, and then it'll direct you back into Unity here, and then you can import it from there. The assets tab isn't there for you. Okay, if it's not there for you, you can go to Window, Asset Store right here.
And then if anyone does like 3D modeling, like pixel art or sprites or something, you could upload like your assets to the asset store and then like charge money for it.
Yeah.
Make some money on the side or something like that.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys in the call heard, but Larry said if you make 3D models, you could put it on the asset store and charge money if you want to. So that's an option too. First, what we're gonna do is we're gonna edit some project settings. So go to Edit, Preferences. And here you could change some aspects about the editor itself. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go to External Tools, and what we're trying to do here is when we create a script, which is basically where we're gonna code in, we're gonna decide what program it opens to edit the script. So here where it says Open by File Extension, you wanna click Visual Studio Code, and then it should be good to go after that. So if you make a script, it should open in Visual Studio Code. If you have another software, like I know sometimes people use Visual Studio. We're just using Visual Studio Code because it's like lighter and it's easier to work with. But you can use Visual Studio Code, so you could change it to that and use that. But for today's purposes, we're going to use Visual Studio Code. Okay. Is there anything else I want to go over? Okay, so I'm just gonna go over like a basic pipeline, I guess, of how things work. So basically what you wanna do is you wanna drag things you're gonna use into this area down here. This is your assets folder, and you wanna make different folders to sort the different things you're gonna use. And then you could drag them either into the scene or into the hierarchy to put them into the scene. And then you could edit them and play around and make a level from there. For preferences, you do edit, and at the bottom, there's preferences. Are you gonna show them the project settings for like the inputs?
Oh, you could do that.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions? Nope, okay. So one more thing I'm gonna show you before I hand this off to Larry is if you go back to edit, right above preferences, there's project settings. So these are actual things that you could edit in the game. So what we're gonna edit is the input manager. So basically, these are your inputs for the game. So if you wanna like move forward, like what key do you have to press to go forward? So they're called axes, and they're represented by these names here. And you could change however many inputs you want by like by changing this number here. So you could, if you need 2 more inputs, you could change it to 20, and it'll generate 2 more inputs here. And what we're gonna do is we are going to change horizontal and vertical, right? Or I guess we're not gonna change it because it's already set to what we need. But right here you can see a negative button. So if we're moving in the horizontal direction and we want to go left, that's negative. We either click left or A, so like WASD, A is left, and left would be the arrow key, and the positive button is right, so that would be D right here, or the right arrow key. And say you wanted to like have a key that's like, oh, I want there to be a key where I use my ultimate. You can make one that says ultimate, and it's like you press the positive button is Q. So yeah, that's We're not going to change anything about that right now because by default it's set to WASD, which is what we're going to use. And we're going to get started with Larry.
Thank you very much, Enzo. All right, so now we're actually going to start creating our scene for Unity, and we're going to start preparing it. And our goal here is to create some sort of first-person movement. And then later we'll add on stuff if we have the time to do so. So here we have the scene. You've already been familiarized with it. Let me scroll in a bit more. Yeah, so you can reset the camera position here if you right-click. Or wait, no. Right-click here on the transform, just click reset. It should reset all the values to like its original property. And then let's move this camera thing down here. So first off, we want to start off by making a plane. So if you right-click here on the hierarchy, you're going to see this list pop up. You can.
It said the audio is being cut off.
Oh, audio is being
Just
cut off.
try or speaking directly into the mic.
All right. Can everyone hear me now?
You don't have to do ASMR.
Yeah, I know. All right. All right. Let's just let me know if it gets any worse or if it gets better. Yeah. All right. So what you want to do is go to where it says 3D object, and then you want to go to put in plane. So it's going to give you like a square, and it's just a 2D square. There's no like any dimension to it or anything like that.
Show them that it's completely flat.
Yeah, it is completely flat. So, yeah. So you create that plane, and we're going to label that as our floor for this project. So you could, why is this? Okay. You could either right-click here, rename, or you could go to the right-hand side with the inspector. No, it does not fly, unfortunately. You can call it floor. And then you want to just press Control-S to save every now and then, just to make sure that you don't lose any project on your project.
Any progress.
Progress on your project. Oh, okay. So right-click on the under the hierarchy on the left-hand side, and then go to 3D object, and then it should say plane right here. It's like the 5th item.
Yeah. So you can see there's lots of different things we can create on the side or in the hierarchy. So we're gonna go over really basic 3D stuff, but feel free to experiment on your own time with these things. This is cool.
It's a mic.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Cool. Anyone else have problems with putting up the plane? Anyone in the workshop? All right. I think we're good then. All right. So this plane, it's not actually on 0, 0. So you can notice here under the inspector, under position, it's not exactly at the center of the world, and we kind of want it to be at the center of what we're doing. So you could just reset the values, just like we did with the camera. So right-click here under transform, and then just click reset. And then once it's there, we're going to give it a second. All right. Once it's there, we're going to place in our player character. So what's nice about first-person shooters, especially when prototyping a first-person shooter or just first-person movement in general, you don't actually need to have a model for the player. And you could just place like a temporary model since the player is not actually going to see your character. So we're going to go here. We're going to go back to 3D object, and then we're going to make this character a cylinder. So right there, you got a little cylinder man, and then we can call him Cindy, like that.
Just call it player.
Player, damn. All right, and then you want to reset its position as well. So you can notice here the cylinder compared to the plane, it's actually 3D and all of that. And then we want to make sure it's above the plane here. So you can move it up like this, or you could just like type in 1 under Y. So that way it's above the plane when we test out on playing it. We have the cylinder here. What you want to do is you want to move up the reset the position. So you could go here, put your mouse where the transform is, right-click, and then reset.
Yeah, and that's after you click it.
Oh yeah, that's after you click it. Make sure you have this little orange highlight over it, and then you could reset it. Yeah.
Or you could just click it in the actual product.
Oh yeah. And then you can notice here the scale, since we weren't able to show it last time, if you increase the scale, you could get the cylinder to be more oval-like. And then you could increase it, and then you could do it for all of the axes. And then here we have a few components. The mesh filter actually shows like what type of mesh it is. So it's going to read the data as a cylinder, giving us the, the information as a cylinder. Sometimes you don't usually want to mess with this one or this one too much at the moment. We'll talk more about the mesh renderer later on. Yeah. And then here the capsule collider. This sort of just tells like Unity like what the thing can collide with or not. So there's like this shape. It looks. Let me think.
Orange shape.
Yeah. Or no.
Off the mesh renderer.
Turn off the mesh renderer. Yeah. Okay, so it's this green outline right here. It's a bit hard to see, but so that's basically what your character will be colliding with, and then so there's no like physics properties on it or anything. It's just sort of like what the character collides with and all of that. So let's add back the mesh renderer just so you can see the cylinder. And then now we're going to be adding a component. So there's a bunch of different types of components in Unity. You could add stuff like audio listeners or different types of physics materials. For us, we want to be adding something called a rigid body. And then you want to make sure you select the rigid body, not the rigid body 2D. Rigid body 2D only applies if you're going to be making something like a 2D game. And if you missed it, just click here where it says add component, and then go to rigid body, and then add it there. So next up, because it's a first-person game, we want to make sure our camera follows the player. Right now, our camera, if we just hit like play, all we're going to see is, all we're going to see is this. The camera doesn't actually see anything at the moment, so we're going to move back out. And then we're going to move this camera, and then we're going to drag it over the player. And it should be highlighted sort of like this with a faint, like lighter gray. And then we move the camera to there. So what that does is that it makes the camera a child of the player. So if we move the player around, the camera will follow it. But obviously, if we hit play, we don't want the camera here at the bottom of the player. We want it to be at the top of the player, right? So here, if we end play, we can move up the camera from the player. Oh, wait, no. So yeah, so make sure you click on the camera, and then you can move it up. So it's going to see from the player's perspective. You could just change it to 1, since the cylinder is about like 1 unit tall. And then you can move the player back to where it originally was. And then this is one more thing. This is sort of a small change, but if you are working with the games, you just want to make sure like your thing is consistent. A lot of games go by the 16:9 aspect ratio. So that's like 1080p by 1920. We want to make sure our camera is like that. If you look at our thing right here, the camera kind of just matches whatever this window is. We don't want it to be like that. We want it to be consistent depending on whatever experience you're trying to make. And then if you go here to game, the game tab, you can see where it says free aspect. We're going to be clicking on that, and then you're going to click right beneath it where it says 16:9 aspect, and then that changes the ratio. So it creates a 16:9 aspect ratio. Finally, we have our scene like kind of set up. We want to increase the floor size here. Okay, give it a second. All right, just to repeat myself for the Discord, if we want, we can increase the floor size here. So if you'd like, you could change the scale to 50 by 50 on the X and Z axis. You could change it on the Y axis too. I don't know how much that's actually going to change anything. Yes, because there's no Y depth, so you can't really do anything with that. We're going to actually start coding, and we're going to be trying to do, first of all, we want to get the camera to look around. So if you go here in the project folder at the bottom, right-click, and then create create a C# script. And then we're going to call this look around. For coding, it's generally good practice. If you, instead of using spaces, you want to change the name. You want to make the file name. If it's going to be like a new word or something, you capitalize that word. I forgot what the name of that specific syntax is. Camel case? Yeah, camel case syntax.
Oh yeah, I guess camel case, the first letter is lowercase.
Yeah. So we're going to create that script, and then you want to double click on that script. And then you should, VS Code or the editor of your choice should be showing up here. There's a few things that comes with the Unity scripts when you first open them up. This is sort of to help ease you into the process of programming. So here at the top, it's going to say like using all of these different tools. That's just different packages and how stuff like different like properties and stuff and how Unity works.
If you get rid of that, it won't work.
Yeah, if you get rid of it, usually don't touch this. But if you want to work with stuff like the UI, or if you want to try Unity's AI system, you could type in like using Unity engine.ui or AI. Usually there's different types of things, and then there's more documentation that we'll be sending later on that sort of goes over how to do all of that. And then here's the important stuff. You have here void start and void update. The comments here sort of explain themselves. Void start, anything you put on there will happen before the game actually starts, or that scene in particular starts. And then here in void update, this is called every frame. So, you know, if you're trying to check for input from a player, you could check for the input here and then have it go at every frame.
Yeah, so basically, the update function keeps going as long as the game is going. So it always keeps calling itself over and over again.
Mono behavior referred to.
So mono behavior is that is the class that this inherits from. So all C# scripts by default inherit from mono behavior, and that just gives it like some like functions that it inherits. So I don't know how familiar everyone is with like inheritance and like CS stuff, but it basically means that mono behavior is like a built-in class in Unity, and every script that you make by default inherits from that class. So if you wanted to make your own class and then have another class inherit from that class, you could do like look around : inherit, or and then the name of the other class you wanted to inherit from.
It's really good for sharing stuff like to sort of help reuse code that you've used before. So instead of having mono behavior, you could change it to like if you're making like a gun script and you want to have like different, you want to reuse like the ammo count and then all of that sort of things, like the reload and like the general usage, you could change this to like whatever you name the script, like gun general, and then it helps share the code so you don't have to like retype everything, and it's more clean that way. All right, so we're going to start actually programming. So what we want to do is get this to move around when you move your mouse. And we're going to start off. You can navigate around by pressing, you can add like a little indents with tab, and then you could just press enter to skip to new lines and stuff like that. We're going to start off by putting in this square bracket. We're going to be creating the variables for our game. So the important ones that we want to use right now is the mouse sensitivity and the player body. So the mouse sensitivity is essentially a value just to know. So it allows you could change it to make it like move around the camera more or less, depending on how much you move your mouse. And then the player body is to check like what you're actually trying to move. So we want to start off by putting a bracket here, and it's like the square one. We want to type in serialized field. And then inside of the bracket, so serialized, not serialized, field, and then with a capital F. You want to add a space, type in private float. And a float is basically a number with a decimal in it. Just if, for those of you who are new to programming, there are different types of so like int, float, long. So float and oh yeah, double. So long and double, long double float. They're all generally same thing right now for these purposes. All of them have a decimal at the end and it just sort of determines how many decimal figures you could have after. For integer, it's only what? Oh, what's up? Okay. For integer, it's only whole numbers, so you can't have any like yeah, it's only whole numbers, so no decimals and stuff like that. So here we want to label it, so we're going to call it mouse sensitivity. And then we're going to make it equal to 500F. Whenever you're working with floats, you usually want to add an F at the end to declare it as a float number. Otherwise, usually you'll run into some issues. And then the second variable we're going to add is serialize field, private, transform, player body. Oh, okay. So for transform, it's going to tell like the location, the rotation, and other details about the player. And then it sends that to the script, and the script knows what you're going to do. And then for those of you who are new to Unity, you may be wondering what the serialized field means. So what it's going to do, if we hit save here, actually, let's add in one more variable. We're going to add in our x rotation. So private float x rotation, and then we're going to make that equal to 0 for now. So notice how I didn't put a serialized field here, and then we'll show you what that does in a second. All right. From here, this is just sort of the variables we have set up for now. We want to switch over to Unity just so I could show you how to actually place the thing on the player.
So every time you edit and save a script and you go back into Unity, it needs to reload all the changes you made. So it'll do that every time. Just letting you know.
Yeah. Just make sure you actually save the script with Control S. So we're going to go here to the player, and then right now we don't actually have the script on the player. The script's just sitting in a folder. Oh, okay. So transform essentially just is all the data of the player's movement. So that explains like the position, the rotation, and the scale of it. And that's like important information, like especially if we want to move or rotate our player. So here we're going to go to add component, or actually we could just get the script from here where it says look around. And then we're going to drag it into the inspector with our player. So make sure you have the player selected here in the hierarchy. And then we're going to drag in the look around script to here. Why is this like this? Okay, never mind. Here you go. So this is where the serialized field comes in. So notice here how it shows you the script name, and then it says mouse sensitivity, and then the player body. But you don't see where it says X rotation. So yeah, so serialized view allows us to see the variable right here. Another way that you could do it is instead of typing in serialized view, you want to put in public instead of private. Right here, but it's generally like this just goes for coding in general. It's not good practice to put in public for all of your variables because of sort of like data security and stuff like that. So generally, we want to try and keep things private. And a serialized view allows us to see that information and edit it. So you could try and edit the information here. We want to keep the thing at 500, mouse sensitivity at 500 for now. I just want to go over some C#. So C# is very like close to Java if you're a first year, or if you're like new to computer science and you're learning computer science, or if you're learning coding here at Pomona, you're going to be using Java a lot. Despite its name, C# is closer to Java than it is to something like C++. And then if you're new to Okay, if you're new to programming also and saw last week's workshop, you may have noticed that we don't end stuff with a semicolon. That's because Python works differently and it's weird. But here in C#, we want to end stuff with a semicolon. That just essentially tells the code that like, hey, this line of code's done, and then you can continue.
Oh, he put serialized.
Oh, okay. Remove.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want serialized field. Remove the D next to the.
It's serialized field, not serialized.
I kept making that mistake also. It's all good.
You'll find that spelling is very important in CS, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then make sure you save again.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, now we can move on. All right. So since we already have these functions in here, we want to actually start moving our mouse around. So for here, under void update, you want to type in, we want to make some new variables. So we're going to make float mouse x equals input dot get axis. I'll go slower. Sorry.
I just finished the whole line.
Yeah. And then you'll want to type in mouse x. So this looks for the x-axis or the horizontal movement of your mouse.
Yeah. If you remember earlier when we edited the inputs, there's one called mouse x. So what we're basically getting is what the value is for the input in mouse x. So if we're like moving left on the mouse, the value is somewhere between 0 and -1. If we're moving right with the mouse, it's somewhere between 0 and 1.
And then you want to, so this is going to return us a value, as Enzo said. And then we want to multiply that value by our mouse sensitivity. So the multiply in this case would be an asterisk. And then you don't have to add the space in there. I just do it for clarity's sake. And then you want to type in your mouse sensitivity variable. And then for now, we'll add a semicolon. And then we'll do the same thing, but for the y-axis. Make sure that the input is capitalized, get axis, both words are capitalized. Make sure that your mouse, the mouse and then the X and Y respectively are capitalized as well. So we're gonna go down to here. We're gonna make, we're gonna do transform, oh wait, no. Transform dot local rotation.
Yeah. So this is editing the transform of itself, basically.
Yeah.
When you just type transform by itself, it's just the transform of the object you're working with.
Quaternion. So this deals with rotation. This is like how you change a rotation. There's a lot of math that goes behind this, but today we're going to simplify it by saying I told you so. So x rotation, you want to put that variable in, and then 0f, comma 0f. And then put a semicolon there. Make sure you have the 2 commas there. And then down here, we're going to type in player body dot rotate. And then you want to make 2 parentheses, or the parentheses, vector3 dot up times mouse x. So this function, the transform dot local rotation, that's going to be changing the horizontal movement or the horizontal rotation of your character. And since you need to move the entire character as well, so let's go back to the game. You want to, like, if you're moving your character around, you want the entire character to move, not just the camera. So that's why it's different than what's here on the Y rotation. So for the Y rotation, you just want to be moving the camera up and down because you don't want the whole player model to move around. Imagine if you're playing Valorant and then you look down, but your entire character just flips to the side, just horizontal like that. You don't really want that.
I mean, that lowers your hitbox, so maybe you want that.
I guess, yeah. But then you can't hit anything.
That's true.
All right. So if you notice, we hit play, but suddenly you're getting this error at the bottom. Player body has not been assigned. What you want to do, so basically the code says that, yeah, there's a player body variable, but if you notice down here, there says nothing has been added. So what you want to do is drag your player from the hierarchy and then move it down here to the look around script. And it should add the player transform right there. If you hit play, you can see the camera is moving incredibly fast. And then if you want, actually, so we're gonna make it so you could actually differentiate like between objects, because I realize you probably can't do that too well. You're gonna right click here under the assets, go to create, and then we're gonna add something called a material. So you have your new material there. You can name it whatever. I'm gonna name it floor mat, floor material. And then here, under here for main maps, you're going to click on the color thing and then change it to whatever color you want. I'm gonna make it a pool of blood. And then you could drag this material onto here. And then we're going to add, just for like reference, just so you know you're actually like moving something around, we're gonna add a new 3D object. We're gonna add a cube. And then there's gonna be this little cube here. We don't have to name it. We could just call it cube or cube. Yeah, cube. And then if you take a look at the camera, you can see it right there. And then if you want to hit play and then test the code again. So yeah, so there's a few things wrong with this, right? Noticing it is going way too fast. And then also your mouse is not locked in. So you could accidentally just like click off the screen. So if you have like two monitors or something, click off the screen, you're suddenly on Google. You're on Google Chrome or Discord or whatever's on your second screen. So of course we don't want that. So you want to exit here. We're going to go back into the scripting. And then, so what we're going to do now is we're going to fix the first issue, which was it was going too fast. The problem is that it updates every frame. And we want it to be a more consistent thing. We want it to go with the time of our computer. So we're going to multiply this by time.delta time. And that essentially smooths everything out. And then we're going to do the same for the bottom, or the y-axis.
Generally, when you're doing, when you're moving things around in Unity, you want to multiply by time.delta time, because then your increments happen as increments per frame. So when you don't use time.delta time, your speed is actually locked to your frame rate. So if your frame rate goes down, then the speed of everything will go down too. So you don't want that to happen.
Wait, I realized we forgot something. Want to add something? Because if you notice, you were probably just able to move it super fast left and right. You also want to add X rotation and then minus equal mouse Y. So what this does is it basically tells you that it can do up and down rotation. And then the minus equals there is telling it that it could, so it's basically equivalent to this. Rotation equals X rotation minus mouse Y. That's essentially the same thing. You could write it either way. It's just easier to write it this way, so it's just shorter. It's a nice little shortcut to have. All right. And then the last piece of code, we're going to be fixing up the whole mouse doesn't move. We're going to type in up here under void start. We're going to put a cursor dot lock state equals cursor lock mode dot locked. So this makes it so your mouse isn't just freely moving around. It's actually locked to the middle of the screen, and all it's reading is the movement to move it around. So let's go back to the game. And then reload the assets, scripts, yep. I know. All right, so here we go. Now you notice another issue we're having. We can somehow go upside down with our movement. So now, but at least now it's more smoother, right? It works more smoothly, all of that stuff. So we're gonna go fix up that issue. Let's go back to the script. And then for here, we're gonna go type in X rotation equals mathf dot clamp parentheses X rotation negative 90f and then 90f and then semicolon. So basically this clamps the thing so you don't have to go past that 180. We don't have a marker. I forgot to bring one. But yeah, so if your player's like right here, your camera cannot go past it so it doesn't go upside down. The view doesn't go upside down. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it for the movement script. There, so if you want to play just to test it, I can't go up or I can't go too far. And right now, all you can do is just look around. Why is this? All right, guys, I made a huge mistake. So we're supposed to attach this script onto the camera itself. Oops. So here you want to click on the three dots here under look around script, and then click remove component. So it gets rid of it from the player. Next, you want to click on camera, and then click add component. You can add the look around script, and then make sure you add your player back in, just so you have your player's body. And now, if you hit play, you should be able to look around. Yeah. There we go. Yay. If you're having issues with the player falling over, you want to go here to the rigid body, and then you want to freeze the rotation. So under here, it would look like this. You can't see the little restraints thing. You want to click on the little triangle for constraints and freeze all three of these. This won't affect how your player moves because the script overrides it, but it will deal with the physics of like your player just like tumbling over. For other games, you may want to have the fall over thing, like if you're doing like some sort of physics thing with spears, or even something like, think of Fall Guys. You want to have that sort of thing. The next part is the movement, and there's significantly more that goes into it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna change our plans. We're gonna copy and paste the code that we're gonna run, and then we'll also send you guys the GitHub repository if you want to look through it some more. And then we're gonna place it in here, and then we'll walk you through. We'll sort of walk through and talk about what is actually in the script. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys how to drag and drop it into here. So if we go back, so if you want to go into the Discord chat, go to the meeting general. For everyone who's in meeting general, you probably already saw this. We have the entire script for our movement here, and there's some extra stuff in it that we'll also go over in a bit. We're going to download that script. And this is like good, like if you're watching a tutorial and they have the script available for you, you could just like download that sort of stuff. And then you want to go to the folder that it's downloaded into. So you have it here in downloads. And then you want to go to the file where your project is. For most people, it's usually here in documents, or it might be in another place. If you want to make sure like you know where it is, go to Unity Hub and it should say the location of your project. So yeah, for here, I want to go to my passport, go to game design, my project, and then we go to assets. And then here we have all of our stuff. So what we want to do is drag this movement script into the assets folder.
Or you can just drag it into the project.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. All right.
It's all good. I'm good.
Yeah. So if you want, you could you can also drag the movement into here. Oh, it still has the grappling stuff.
Oh, that's why there's an error.
Yeah. All right.
We have
So-
to give them everything.
Yeah. So we're gonna open up the stuff here. All right. So if you notice some stuff, there's going to be other.
The reason you're getting an error right now is because it uses stuff from other classes that we haven't given you.
Yeah, we were also, like, if we had more time, and then we'll also give you guys the files if you want to try and implement it. We were going to add like a grappling hook feature as well. So here you just want to comment this out by pressing two slashes. Yeah, we'll go back to that another time. We can send you guys the link on how to implement it. So yeah, we have here a bunch of different stuff. And we're just going to sort of walk through it just so you know like what's going on in the script and why are the things the way they are. So here we have the variables for all the basic movement and jumping things. So if you want to edit like the variables for stuff, we have the player rigid body, which is you just have to drag in the player just so it knows like what to move around. That you're going to be moving the player. For the speed variable, that's how fast you want the player to be going. And then because it will infinitely accelerate, we place the cap on the speed. So you could determine like what's the max speed you want to have. We also place in a jump height variable. That's self-explanatory, how high you want to jump. And then max jump is how many times you want to jump. So for here, our character has a double jump. And then you could place that there. For a ground drag, you want to place some sort of friction, so just the player can like stop and it doesn't like slowly stop over time. And then for air drag, similar thing, but when you're in the air. And here for a ground check, because when you press jump, it's gonna see those two jumps, and then it's gonna think, all right, you're done. So if you don't have these variables in, you're gonna just stand there, and then you can't jump anymore. So you're kind of just like stuck there. Having the ground check tells it, it's like, okay, players on the ground, I'll give them 2 more jumps again. And then it will reset your jump. And then these variables are here just sort of like for tracking and stuff like that, for just lets you know like the player velocity and all of that. And then here your input, this is the variables, just like the numbers for the input. And then these grapple variables, this is just to tell, we can skip past that for now. So here we're going to place, in the start, we want to tell the game that the player has 2 jumps. So we place the temp jump, we give the max jump, and we give it to the temporary amount of jumps. And then in our void update, we're going to be focusing on these components. So the is grounded is just a little circle to check if the player is on the ground. And then you're going to have here your move input. So if you check here, we're going to go down to where it says move input. So we're going to see it right here. This is just saying it's like, okay, so if the player is pressing W or A and D, move left or right. If the player's pressing W or S, you're going to move forward or backwards. And then if you press the jump button, you press the jump button. And then, so basically, it's going to go into, we're going to have the jump here, and it's going to play over here. So jump press, and then jump is grounded. So let's go to the jump to see how that works. So ignore this again. So for the jump button, it's going to check if the player pressed the jump button. If the player did press the jump button, and they have appropriate amount of jumps, they could jump up. And then we remove like one of the jumps from them. And then if the player is grounded, if the player's on the ground, then we give them back all of their jumps. And then you're probably wondering why the move function is in a different area, why there's 2 different types of updates. So fixed update is to make sure that the physics doesn't go with the frame rate, similar to what the other issue with our mouse was earlier. It makes it so it's more like consistent and it doesn't like overload the computer as much with all the physics calculations. So let's go into the move script. Again, we're going to ignore the active grapple here. And then here we're going to create a vector. So a vector is just like a direction in a space. If you guys have taken physics before, I really wish I had a marker on me. it's just like 2 points, and then it's gonna like make a line. In this case, it's 3 points because it's a three-dimensional vector. And then we're gonna be doing basically a bunch of math to tell it like which direction the player needs to go. And then we're going to be adding a force to to sort of like push the player into like the direction it wants to go, and then it creates the speed. And then the control speed deals with all of the friction stuff and the max speed. So over here,
Yeah, what's going on here is we have a vector 3 flat velocity. So we're taking the x and z input, or the x and z values for the player, right? So that's everything that's on the ground. And we're checking to see if the magnitude of those inputs, or those values, is greater than the max speed. So the max speed tells us how fast we're allowed to move. If they're greater than that, we're normalizing it. So what normalizing it does, it means is we make the values between 0 and 1, and we multiply it by the max speed. So it can't be greater than the max speed if we normalize it. And then we just set the speed down to this new velocity that's capped at this max speed, basically.
yeah. And then next up is just gonna check if it's on the ground, it will give the drag, or it will just give the air drag. So let's actually test out the script to make sure it's working. So there's a few stuff that we need to implement similar to how the player body is. Well, we actually haven't actually placed it on the player yet. Give it a second. Go to the player, and then at the very bottom, you're going to add component, you're gonna add the movement. And then here, there's a few things. So like with here for the ground check and for the, okay, so we need to create the ground check. So for player RB, you just wanna click on the player, make sure that it knows that that's what it's gonna be moving around. Was everyone able to get the movement script on there? Like that? Yeah. All right. So now we want to create the ground check. The ground check is its own thing, and then it's basically another thing that we need to add to the player itself. For the ground check, we need to actually create it because there's no like physical thing telling it that it's checking the ground. So we're going to right-click on the player and then create empty. So it's gonna create this new thing down there where it says game object and it's highlighted. Call it ground check. And then we're gonna save that. And then here, and then you see here, there's like this empty that's at the center of the player. If you have ground check selected, that is not the player, that's the ground check itself. So it's an invisible sort of like position in the field, or position in the scene. So there's like nothing to it, there's no like model, but you can add like this little icon thing. If you press on the little cube and then you click like blue, it's gonna tell you, oh yeah, that's where the ground check is. Or you could make it whatever color you'd like to be. And for the, you wanna make it under Y, you wanna make it -1. And then it's going to be right there. But now we're going to have to create, so now if we go back to the player, you can see under the ground check, we have, there's nothing actually in the transform. So we can move this ground check and place it in the transform, or you could click here and just click the little ground check thing. So it should say ground check. So next up, we're going to scroll back down to the player check. You're going to see this thing called a ground mask. Now what that is, it's going to play with Unity's layer system.